My name is Nate, and I'll see you next week on the Short Box. So, yeah, that was a lie. A lot has changed since I made that last video, but I'm here and I'm ready to start posting more videos here. It's pretty self-explanatory. I'm basically just gonna go over everything that I read this month, so hopefully you guys get some good recommendations out of it. At the end of the video, I'm gonna pick 3 books from this month that I read that I think are not only my favorites of the month, but are books that I think whether you are a new reader or a returning comic reader, that you will get something out of them. They'll be my prestige picks, I'll call them. But anyway, I read 115 issues worth of comics this month, so we got a lot to get through. Let's get right into it.
January.
I started out the year with Harleen by Shapan Seyich. If I pronounced that wrong, I'm very sorry. It's the same guy that's behind Sunstone, which yeah, I don't think I can show you guys that. This book is basically a retelling of Joker and Harley's relationship and how they fell in love solely from the perspective of Dr. Harleen Quinzel. I read the series as it was coming out years ago, but I got the hardcover for Christmas this year, so I decided might as well check it out, and yeah, it's a good book. I think I like it more the second time around. What I think this book does really well is its portrayal of Joker and Harley's relationship. It does a lot to reiterate what their relationship has been and what it should be, in my opinion. They play around with the typical romance aspects of like romance stories, but there's a disturbing undertone to the whole thing because, well, Joker's a murderer and Harleen is his psychiatrist, so I don't think you need me to tell you that that's a big no-no. The art in the book isn't my personal cup of tea. I personally prefer more cartoony styles, but if you're somebody that likes sort of digital realism, this book like exceeds at that. Like, it's really good looking art in that department. It could have benefited from being like longer just to fully flesh out some of the side characters such as Harvey Dent, and maybe even sprinkle in just a little bit more Batman. Not too much, just a pinch, just a little bit. But I still think that this book was really good. It's 3 issues and it's a pretty quick read. If you are a Harley Quinn fan, I think that you will get a lot out of this. I think that it is a essential read now for Harley Quinn. But yeah, it's, like I said, really solid. It got an average of an 8.3 out of 10. The next book that I read this month was Batgirl Year 1, written by Scott Beatty and Chuck Dixon, with art by the amazing Marcos Martin. I've read this book before, years ago. It's actually the book that got me into Barbara Gordon as a character. Yeah, I liked it then and I still like it now. The story is pretty self-explanatory. We're seeing Barbara Gordon in her early years, how she became Batgirl, and what drives her as a character to fight crime. What I've always liked about Barbara Gordon as a character is that she's not somebody that was directly recruited by Batman. She wasn't adopted by Bruce Wayne or anything. This is all just her doing her own thing. We see in this book that she is directly inspired by the vigilantism of Batman and Robin. She wants to do more for society and she wants to help Gotham City, but as a like small woman, a lot of people doubt her. And it's something that I think is played up really well in this book, is that she really just wants to help. And I think that that's a core tenet of Barbara Gordon as a character that I just find super admirable. If you've seen like Batman the Animated Series or the 2003 animated show, I think that you will like this book. It's a very nostalgic feeling book, both in the sort of way the story comes about, but also in the way that the art looks. I think that because this book is just a very simple story that's solely focused on character building and one of the core themes being hope, I think that Marcos Martin being on pencils really shines in this. Another thing I really liked about this book was the supporting cast. We get Batman, Robin, Commissioner Gordon, and then we get the villains, Killer Moth and Firefly, and they're written excellently in this book. And because we have so many of these characters in here, it makes Gotham City feel really lived in and established. I think that this is one of, if not the best jumping on point for Batgirl as a character. I'm pretty sure that this was the basis for the Batgirl movie that we were gonna get with Leslie Grace, and it's really unfortunate that we just might not ever see that movie, because I think that this was a really good book to adapt. But yeah, it's a really solid book. I gave this an average of an 8.8 out of 10. This month I read 2 long series, the first of which is The Unbelievable Gwenpool by Christopher Hastings and illustrated by the amazing Japanese duo Gurihiru. This book's been on my radar for a while. A lot of people have said I would like this book, but I'll be honest, I don't like Deadpool. So the idea of reading a Deadpool book, but instead of it being Deadpool, it's a teenage girl, it just didn't grab me immediately. But I finally decided to give it a read, and I gotta say, if you are one of those people that thinks Gwenpool is just a Deadpool clone, you are so Sorely mistaken, my friend. I was pleasantly surprised by this book. For starters, I love the art in it. It has this really sort of anime sort of vibe to it that I think works really well for not only Gwenpool, but also sort of the tone of story. The art is so good, in fact, that whenever we would go to a guest artist, it would be kind of jarring because the art is just that distinct and vibrant and amazing. But that's not to say that the art ever got bad. I think throughout the entire book, the art and the writing in this was just fantastic.
Say that again?
To basically pitch the story to you, Gwenpool is a real girl from our world, like planet Earth, and she's transported to the Marvel Comics universe. She's a big fan of all things Marvel, and as a result, she has all this knowledge, and that both plays a huge role in her getting out of sticky situations, but also sort of the negative aspects of her character in this book, which I think was done really well. What I really like is that her knowing about the Marvel universe was both a good thing and a bad thing. It causes problems that are both funny, but also can be quite dramatic. On the note of humor, I think it's something that's balanced really well and is actually done pretty smartly here. It's less of like this sort of LOL random surprise humor, really focused on the fourth wall that Deadpool popularized, and it's more focused on sort of using the Marvel universe as not really the butt of jokes, but using some of the ridiculousness of these characters as some punchlines. I think Gwenpool's desire to escape reality and be a hero in this fictional universe was just a really interesting one to follow, because we do see sort of the psychological toll that this takes on Gwen. We see that just because she's in this world and she's doing sort of her dream, a lot of what she's doing she has to sort of learn has consequences, and that's sort of the big aspect of this book that I liked a lot, is that Gwen's actions had consequences. And even though like a guest character would show up like Miles Morales, she would do something that Miles just would not agree with, and I think that that was a really cool aspect, was to have morality be a huge part of Gwenpool's character. Not all the time can things be right, that people are going to have conflicting sort of opinions on how to handle things. I mentioned Miles Morales a little bit ago. A good chunk of this book is team-ups. They play a good part in really developing Gwen as a character. Like, they're not just there for fun crossover's sake. They're there to kind of show Gwen she has issues that she needs to resolve if she wants to sort of make it in this world. This book is really good. I read the entire original Christopher Hastings run. Across all of those issues, it got a score of a flat 8 out of 10. I finally got around to reading the Doom one-shot that released last year, written by Sanford Green and Jonathan Hickman, with Green also being the artist for the book. The premise is simple. In the distant future, Dr. Doom teams up with his goddaughter Valeria Richards, related to Reed and Sue Richards, to put up one last fight against the threat of Galactus. I haven't read any Fantastic Four runs, but like I said, I really like Dr. Doom, and this book gets down to what makes him work. I think that his like unwavering mentality is really what makes him distinct from a lot of other villains. We see that even though he is facing the threat of an existential threat that us human minds could not possibly comprehend, he still has this idea that he's gonna take him down because he is powerful, and he knows he's gonna do that because he's that guy. Dr. Doom is that guy. It's just a really admirable trait, even though he's somebody that's a bad guy. But also his relationship with Valeria in this is written very well. You get this sort of Logan vibe from Valeria and Doom in this book, and it's a really interesting way to take the character. We see that even though Doom has a lot of issues, he is willing to sacrifice a lot for humankind, and it's just, like I said, it captures Doom in such a good way. I will say that if you are interested in this book, I would recommend getting into Doom as a character first. I think that this works sort of more as a coda than an introduction to Doom as a character. But it was really good. I gave the book a score of a 9 out of 10. I also finally got around to reading Superman and the Authority, written by Grant Morrison and illustrated by Mikkel Janin. This one's been on my radar for a while because it's written by Grant Morrison and their work is just fantastic.
Say that again?
They're one of my favorite writers in comics ever, and because this was sort of pitched as Morrison's final DC book, so I definitely wanted to see what it was about. The idea is that in the future, Superman enlists the help of Manchester Black and puts together a team of misfit and reluctant heroes to take on threats such as the Ultra-Human. Considering that Morrison is one of my favorite writers, and sort of the backstory of this book is that it's a slap in the face to DC execs that wanted to take Superman in this very dark and pessimistic approach, I had high expectations for the book. And I'll be honest, I was a little bit let down. While I thought the book itself was pretty good and it captured Superman's sort of essence as a character, I think this really would have benefited from being like 2 issues longer, just to flesh out the team. The authority that's put together in this book is a really interesting mix of characters, so I kind of just wanted to see some of the more obscure ones shine, like Natasha Irons, the Omet character, and just sort of see more of them. In the context of the story, Morrison captures Superman at a really interesting point in his life, and that even though he's presented with sort of a low point, he never wavers in hope. They know what they're doing with the character, and they're doing it well. Apparently this is a book that's really important to the War World saga, which I'm not familiar with, so maybe my qualms with the story are resolved there, but for now, I'm just taking the book for what it is. I thought that it was okay. If you are familiar with Superman, I think that this is one that you should check out, but if you are just getting into him, I would say read a little bit of Superman before getting here. This doesn't necessarily reinvent the wheel, but as far as Superman writing goes, it's pretty good. The series got an average of a 7.5 out of 10. I also read the first volume of Suicide Squad by John Ostrander and Luke McDonnell. This is the run that first introduces the characters and sort of what the team is. John Ostrander is a writer that I am familiar with because he's a big name in the comic scene, but I haven't actually read any books from, so I figured this would be a good one to start with. Overall, I like these first couple of issues. It has this different vibe to the movies that I was really surprised by. It takes itself pretty seriously. It's not to say that the book is devoid of humor though. Captain Boomerang is really funny in it. I think that if you liked James Gunn's The Suicide Squad movie, you will like this book. It's very similar in story to that regard, in that it's focused a lot on the mission and sort of the politics of the team. What I really liked about this book is that it feels less like they're a group of friends or like a found family, and more that they're a group of damaged criminals that are forced to work together. It's a very volatile group, and there is a lot of betrayal in this first volume. It's really refreshing just to see how this team operates, because it's very different from how they operate now.
What, we some kind of Suicide Squad?
This book is more concerned with exploring real issues and politics than it is on action and comedy, which I just thought was a really interesting direction. Like in issue 4, we see the squad take down a hate group, and we see how racism is spread and bigotry is sort of lifted by some of the elites in society. It's really complex. I am excited to check out the rest of the run. I will get around to it eventually, but this first volume is really solid. It sticks the landing for the most part. I gave it an average of a 7.6 out of 10. The other long series I read this month was Revival, written by Tim Seeley and illustrated by Mike Norton. And just yeah, it's a thick book. I remember a long time ago I had read the first 5 issues when I was sort of first exploring indie titles, but like I said, that was a long time ago. I saw the compendium for a really good price, so I decided to pick it up and check out the series. The basic premise is that one day in a small town in Wisconsin, the dead rise, but not in the traditional zombie sense. No. Their back is just normal people. With the town quarantined off from the rest of the world, we follow Officer Dana Cypress as she investigates the mystery of the revivers, as well as a murder case that personally affects her. I'm gonna be honest, this book is just one that didn't really grab me. I think that while it starts off pretty strong, it sort of falters towards the middle. We're introduced to the 2 main characters, Dana and Martha, or M, and they're really interesting, and I really liked whenever we would follow them. But this book takes the approach of focusing a lot on the town, which I thought was really interesting. It has this sort of old school Stephen King vibe to it, but I think that that is both a blessing and a curse for this. As a result of just the litany of characters that we are introduced to, I think that there are some that are sort of left in the dust, and I never could really get attached to anyone outside of Dana and M. And also as a result of this, we are constantly shifting perspectives between characters and places, sometimes on the same page, which just became really disorienting for me. By volume 3, I was just pretty fatigued, and I think it does pick up in like volume 4 and a little bit of volume 5, but it just never really reached the heights of volumes 1 and 2 for me. It didn't really help that by volume 6, the book changed radically in tone and story. Like, it became less a small town horror book and more of like an all-out war. I wasn't really into it, to be honest. I kept reading because not only was I intrigued by the mysteries here, but I bought the compendium and I sort of felt an obligation to finish it. I think that definitely scratched like that horror itch that I was looking for, but it didn't really stick the landing as much as I wanted it to. I do want to give the series its flowers though. The art in this by Mike Norton is just amazing throughout the entire series. We see him evolve and change, and it just gets better with every issue. But also, even though I took issue with sort of the broad strokes of the story, I think that Tim Seeley excels at writing like character scenes. There are moments where the characters are just monologuing, and they're really good monologues. And I think that in isolation, a lot of the scenes that I liked work very well, but like I said, I wish I was attached to more of them, especially because this is almost 50 issues long. For me, this isn't a book that I would recommend to rush out to people, but like I said, the book starts off really interesting and sort of meanders towards the middle and ends in a, in my opinion, unsatisfying way, but I think that the art and character-driven sort of scenes really shine. Like, when this book is good, it's good. Overall, across 47 issues, I gave the series an average of a 6.5 out of 10. I read another Image Comics title this month, and that was We Called Them Giants by Kieran Gillen and Stephanie Hans. I'd heard about this book for a while, and honestly it just seemed something that was right up my alley. I really love like when humans meet giants in stories, especially when they slay them. Shout out Shadow of the Colossus, where all my Colossus heads at. The story follows Lori and Annette, who wake up to find their world empty. No one's there. The two are thrown into a post-apocalyptic-esque world where they're forced to survive off the remnants of what they can find while avoiding bandits. Things get even more complicated when they see two godlike giants roaming around nearby, and they're left to wonder if they're peaceful, gentle guardians or benevolent conquerors. First of all, I just want to say, like, the art in this book is just fantastic.
Say that again?
I mean, like, look at it, like that's just one page. It looks so good. There's a sort of beautiful magic to the art that is enhanced tenfold by the story. And it's a simple one, but it has like sort of this Pixar movie feel to it. That although it's simple, it just excels at telling that story. It's about 100 pages, so it's a really short read, but in that time span, it accomplishes just a really good exploration of survival, kindness, communication, and love. Like, it's just really good. It's sort of just like, you know, our experiences dictate how we're going to treat others around us, and it accomplishes that really well. It's a short book, but it packs a mighty punch theme-wise. I gave it a score of a 9 out of 10. In between all of this, I read the first couple issues from Zatanna by Paul Dini. I'll have more to say when I completely reread the book, but my thoughts on it are pretty simple. It's one of my favorite runs, written by one of my favorite writers, about one of my favorite characters, so I'm a little bit biased here. With Zatanna's new run coming out next month, I just wanted to brush up on my Zatanna stuff, so I figured why not go back to the run that got me into her in the first place. And yeah, it's really good. I mean, if you are a Zatanna fan, this is about as good as it gets, other than Justice League Dark. So justice for Zatanna. Give her more stuff, please. I really like this book. I'll have more to say when I reread the whole thing, but for those first couple of issues, I gave them an average of a 9.3 out of 10. I also read 2 manga this month written by Tatsuki Fujimoto, the first of which being Goodbye, Eri. This one-shot follows Yuta, who after the death of his mother, makes a film in her memory, but after being ridiculed in his class, he decides to commit suicide, but he meets Eri, who pushes him down a path of artistic rebirth. I haven't read Chainsaw Man yet, I've seen the anime, but this was my first Fujimoto book, and it is so clear why he is regarded so well in the manga community. As somebody that graduated with a degree in film, I related a lot to Yuta, especially with how, even though you can intend one thing with art, sometimes it's not always well received, and that can take a toll on you. This book is just illustrated beautifully, both literally and metaphorically. This book is one that demands you to make up your own choices for what the book is about. And that's sort of what the book is entailing. Yuta and Eri's relationship in this book is one that just blossoms really naturally, but there's always this undertone of, is this really what I am reading right now? Is this happening in their reality? The story ends intentionally a way that's vague and leaves you with very little answers, but like I said, that's the point of the book. You have to decide what the book is about for you. My interpretation of the book is that it's about how we decide how we remember things, and that everyone around you is doing the same thing. So while you may remember somebody in a certain way, that may not be how someone else sees it that way. It's just a really complex thing, and it's captured so well in this book. It's a thought-provoking book that's pretty short, so I would recommend checking it out if you have the time. And if you want to get into manga, I think that this is one of the best one-shots to check out. I gave the book a 10 out of 10. It's really good. The other book I read this month by Tatsuki Fujimoto was Look Back. This short story follows the extroverted, overly confident Fujino and the shy, introverted Kiyomoto, who form a beautiful bond through their shared love of creating manga. I saw the movie adaptation of this manga in theaters last year, and I'll just get out of the way. It was my favorite movie last year. I cried in the theater. It's fantastic.
Say that again?
And it's the same deal here. Although I was familiar with the story because of my experience with the movie, the manga is just done in a really good way that made it sort of nice to revisit the story under a new lens. It was almost like I was sort of studying the way that this story is executed and how it compares from book to screen. I was seeing what made this story work in the first place for me, and one of the standouts for me is the paneling and how the story itself is paced. I think the way that this just flows panel to panel, and sometimes just its lack of dialogue, paneling works so well, especially for the passage of time in this book. Through the paneling, we see the development of Kiyomoto and Fujino's relationship, and it's just done so exceptionally well. It's a beautiful one to see. Being an artist is something that inherently demands you to be vulnerable, and not everybody's ready for that. But this book shows that together, it can be a beautiful thing. The book asks the question, why do you draw? And that is left for you as a reader to decide for yourself. What makes you tick? I gave this book a 10 out of 10. And the last book that I read this month was Superman Space Age, written by Mark Russell and illustrated by the amazing Michael Allred. This story takes place in an alternate 1960s and 70s and is basically a retelling of Superman's story, but with the looming dread of the end of the world clouding it. Now this is a story that gets Superman to the core. Time and time again, I have had to explain to people that Superman is a really interesting character, and that even though he's overpowered and damn near invincible, that's part of what makes him compelling. Clark in this book was introspective as hell, and I think that was a really good direction to take him. Not only that, but the fact that he stands for justice and hope does not make him immune to making mistakes. He makes a lot in this book. The idea that he's being placed on a pedestal and that his actions are being very closely watched by people is done so brilliantly here, because he's doing what he thinks is the right thing, but sometimes that's not what the people want, and sometimes it's a bad thing for him in the long run. But it's not just Superman that we see in this book, we also see a little bit of Batman, who opposes Superman's way of thinking. They're constantly at odds with each other throughout the book, but they always come together for the betterment of society, because at the end of the day, they're just trying to make the world a better place. And I think that in this day and age, a lot of people could try to take that message away. Not only Batman, we also get the Justice League in this book. And they're done amazingly because, like Superman, they make mistakes. And the Hall of Justice is treated like a debate hall at times. Like, they are always at odds with each other because each of the members have their own way with how they think they should help society. What really makes this book work for me is the fact that it taps into that inherent human desire of wanting things to work out even in the face of failure. Superman being a beacon of hope in this book is just something that works out so well with what Mark Russell was trying to illustrate here. And speaking of illustrations, Michael Allred is one of my favorite artists ever, so seeing him on this book is just amazing. He crafts an amazing looking Metropolis. This book is one that's very cerebral and inherently political, so if that's not something that you want to read, this book ain't for you. But it's one that really dives deep into it. I think people that are feeling sort of superhero fatigue, especially from the movies, may get a lot out of this because it's one that takes the concept of the superhero and really brings to the forefront why it has stood the test of time. If you are a fan of Superman, this is an amazing book and I highly recommend it. If you are not a fan of Superman and want to get into him, this is one of the best books that you can read to get into the character. Throughout the 3 issues, I gave this an average of a 9.2 out of 10. So now it's time to pick my 3 prestige picks for this month. It was really hard because I read a lot of good books this month. This first book that I picked is a really short one, but it's one that in that short page count, it gets you thinking, and that is We Called Them Giants. It's not a superhero book, it's not even an action book, it's just a really simple story about communication, and I think that it is well worth your time. This next pick was really difficult to decide because I read 2 books from the same author and they both got the same score, but I decided that Goodbye Eri would be my next prestige pick for this month. Goodbye Eri is one that I think that if you are looking for a book that sticks with you, it's going to be the one that does it. It's one that by the time I was done reading it, it really sort of made me start putting things into a new perspective, which for any story, that's a great thing to accomplish. And my third and final prestige pick was really difficult to decide because it was between The Unbelievable Gwenpool and Superman Space Age. These are 2 books that really stuck with me this month, and after a long time of deliberation, I decided that The Unbelievable Gwenpool would not be my third prestige pick this month. It would be Superman Space Age. It's a really good book that captures the core of Superman as a character, and with the movie coming out this year, I think that it is one of the best entry-level reads for Superman. The existential dread that surrounds the whole book is just one that's really unique. It's one that as you read it, you see why Superman is the way he is, why that no matter what, his number one deal is hope, and you see that tenfold in this book. So yeah, that was everything that I read in January. It was a really good month. Definitely stick around. I am going to be posting on this channel a lot more this year. I've got so many plans. If you read anything interesting this month, leave it down below. I would love to see what you read. But yeah, if you guys enjoyed, please leave a like. I will see you all next time. Thank you all so much for watching.